this is what I'm going to do today. One bag of clay, and I'm going to make one big pinch pot. So 12.5 kilos, and I will only do pinching for this one. So just follow me.
The clay I use today is called 1154. It's a stoneware clay and also a raku clay, and it has a lot of grog in it. So it's really easy to work with. But as you can see, my surface is not the best. It gives me a lot of trouble in the beginning to wedge the clay. "12.5 kilos, that's really a lot to work with at the same time. So I try to wedge it the best I can, try to get the air out and make the plasticity great in the clay. And after that I try to shape it so it looks symmetrical and has a shape that I'm happy to start with. So by rolling the clay, I get the shape I want.
Okay, so this is now the shape that I want. As you can see, my surface is a little bit wobbly, but I want to have my clay kind of not so high up, because I need to put a lot of power into it so that I actually can work with this clay. So the thing I will do now is start actually pinching, but I will change my camera mode and use this. So I will put this on my stool too. So
all the preparations are now done. Now, when you pinch the traditional way, you use the palm of your hand and your thumb and just turn the clay and try to reach deeper and get perfect edges on the clay, so that you make a mug, for instance. When you work with 12.5 kilos, you have to center the clay, make a hole in the middle, and just squeeze the edges and try to get them the same thickness from the beginning. After that, I try to reach deeper and deeper with my hand, and always use the second hand on the outside so that I know that the shape will be the same, and on the same time I can feel how thick the clay is. My turntable and the chipwood board that I'm using is not the best right now, because the clay doesn't really stay at the same position. It has moved a little bit, and afterwards I could see that my shape didn't actually be perfect on both sides. So as you can see right now, I just try digging in deeper, always pulling on the outside and with the other hand on the inside at the same time. I just use a little bit of water, not too much, because otherwise the clay inside will be too wet. The outside is okay, but if you get too much water inside, it will just get muddy. The technique I use is almost the same as pinching a small pot. The only exception is that you have to use the whole hand and all of your fingers when you do it. You can use one hand inside and the palm of your hand on the outside, like I do right now. Or if you get tired, especially in the hand inside, you can use the back of your hand too. You probably also notice that I tend to change what hand I have inside and outside, because the hand inside gets really tired after a while. This video is speeded up to 370% from the real speed, so this actually took me quite a long time to make. Always when you do big things like this, I recommend that you step aside every now and then, take a look at it from different angles, because sometimes the shape doesn't actually look the way you think if you just see it from the upside. I did not look at my clay from different angles, and the chipwood board and the turntable didn't keep the center all the time, so I actually lost a little bit of the shape in this pot, and you can see it soon. I now try to get the walls even in thickness and actually push them out a little bit from the inside. I work from down in the bottom of the pot and all the way up to the rim. And as you can see, the rim is still a little bit too thick. All the pressure makes your hands really tired, so I actually had to start using the back of my hand for a while. This is heavy, but it's actually a really fun technique to use. One problem with this much clay is that the clay actually weighs a lot, and it might be hard to keep the shape of your clay, especially if it's really wet. So, if I wouldn't have my camera on, I would probably just let this dry for a while every now and then keep on going again. But I wanted to make it all in one take. As you can see now, one of the sides is leaning out a little bit more than the other one, and I cannot see it from the place where I'm standing. So that was a surprise for me when I looked at it later on. If you rush it too much, this will be really hard to make even in shape. So it's much better if you do the same thing over and over and over again, little by little, and just work up the clay, both from the inside and pull also a little bit from the outside. The outside hand is more or less just for support, but sometimes you can squeeze a little bit more with that hand too to get the shape that you want. How much water to use is also a question, but you can actually feel when it feels right or when you need more or less water. If you get too much water inside of your pot, just use a sponge and take it out. I now want my rim to turn a little bit inside, and I try to get it the same thickness everywhere. And as you can see inside, you can see my fingerprints all over the clay. By squeezing the clay this way, you can feel that the thickness is the same, and I try to think about my hand like a claw. I lock my fingers the same position all the way. This way it feels the same, and I know if it's too thick or too thin in some places. If you look closely, you can see that my clay is now off center. So yes, I will have a problem with the shape growing out on one side. I guess that it might be a little bit boring to look at the same technique all the time, and I am actually getting kind of tired in my hands too. Remember that I speeded up this twice or 3 times the normal speed. And I have now reached the height of the pot that I can do right now, because the clay is too wet. So I have to let this dry for a while.
So this is it. I will now leave it to dry and maybe try to get it even, because as you can see it's leaning a little bit to this side. So I might try to get it up on this side too. It's a little bit hard because clay is so wet, and I'm afraid that if I do too much, it might just fall and lose all of its shape. So I will leave it to dry for a while. I put a paper on.
By putting a paper on top, the clay will moist the paper, and it will also keep the shape of your pot. The rim will stay at the same location. So I just let this now dry for 1 day under plastic. 1 day has now passed, and I am working a little bit more on my pot. This time I actually use a wooden tool on the outside so that I get all the dents and different lines away. I am not really sure if I will just leave the rim rough or if I will cut it. And I actually think that I'm going to cut it, but in a really rough way, so that it shows that it's not perfect, because this pot is far from perfect anyway. You can see that the clay has dried a little bit, and it's actually much easier to work on right now, but I can't work really much on it. I can pull it up a little bit more, but after that, if I want to do more, I have to leave it to rest again, at least a day. Time to leave this pot for now. I might put up a second video when I show what to do with it. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again. Bye bye.